When my parents decided that my sister's fake anniversary was more important than my wedding, I chose myself for the first time in my life. And that set off a chain of events that changed everything. I'm Emily, 26, and just a few weeks ago I married the man of my dreams, Jack. The kind of person who makes love feel effortless and steady, like something you can build your future on. Our wedding was supposed to be the beginning of something beautiful, something we had planned for with care and excitement, from the tiniest floral details to the vows we wrote ourselves. But even before I could walk down the aisle, my older sister Haley, who has always found a way to make everything about herself, decided to hijack the joy of my day with one of the most bizarre and hurtful stunts I've ever experienced. She announced, loudly, publicly, and without warning, that she would be hosting an anniversary party on the exact same day as my wedding, celebrating her supposed 2-year milestone with her boyfriend, which up until that moment, none of us had ever heard mentioned before. It wasn't real. It wasn't sincere. It was a carefully timed performance, meant to draw attention, stir confusion, and remind everyone in our lives that no matter what day it was, Haley always had to be the center of it. Jack and I announced our wedding date all the way back in August, choosing June 15th with so much excitement and care because it felt like the perfect start to our life together. We gave everyone plenty of notice, sent out save the dates, and followed up with formal invitations in February to make sure everyone had time to plan and be there with us. My parents and Haley were among the very first to RSVP, and there was no confusion, no overlapping events, no signs that anyone had an issue with the date. It felt like everything was falling into place just the way we had hoped, and for a while I actually believed that even Haley might set aside her usual theatrics to let someone else have the spotlight for once. Then came Haley's announcement, dropped casually into the family group chat like it was the most natural thing in the world. She was planning a second anniversary celebration with her husband, a big party, she said, something intimate but important, and wouldn't it be fun if everyone came? The problem wasn't the idea of a celebration. The problem was the date. June 15th. My wedding day. The same day she had already RSVP'd to, the same day she knew we had spent months preparing for. The kicker? Her real anniversary isn't even in June. It's in August. There was no confusion, no scheduling conflict, no last-minute mix-up. She picked my day on purpose and she didn't even bother to hide it. I called her, trying to give her the benefit of the doubt, hoping for a second that maybe it was all just a misunderstanding, some weird coincidence or mix-up that could be cleared with a simple conversation. But when she answered, there was no apology in her voice, no trace of confusion, just irritation like I was bothering her. "Come on, it's not a big deal," she said bluntly. "Just reschedule your wedding." I remember standing there in stunned silence, the phone pressed to my ear as I tried to process what she had just said. I reminded her, calmly at first, that we had already booked the venue, that the dress was bought, the deposits paid, the catering finalized, that we had spent thousands of dollars and months of planning to make this day happen. But she didn't care. She scoffed, muttered something under her breath, and hung up before I could even finish. Her parents, our parents, took her side without a second thought, as if I should have expected it all along. When I called them, desperate for someone to see how insane this was, my mom's voice was firm but dismissive, like she had already made up her mind before I even opened my mouth. "This is an important moment for Haley," she said, as though my wedding wasn't. As though months of planning and a once-in-a-lifetime moment didn't deserve the same consideration as her daughter's invented celebration. And then my dad, always the quieter one, added in his usual detached way, "My sister is better at maintaining family relationships than I am, so we're going to her." That was it. No apology. No regret. Just a shrug of responsibility and the quiet, crushing confirmation that I wasn't the priority. Not even close. I cried that night, alone in our bedroom while Jack sat beside me in silence, his hand resting on my back as I tried to hold myself together and failed. It wasn't just about the wedding anymore, it was the sting of something deeper, something that had always been there just beneath the surface. It hurt because it felt so familiar, like I was a child again, watching from the sidelines while they chose her, just like they always had. Every time she caused a scene, they excused it. Every time I asked for something, I was told to wait, to understand, to be the bigger person. Jack didn't try to fix it, he knew better. Instead, he looked at me gently and said, "Why don't you talk to your grandfather?" He was right. My grandfather had always been the only one who saw me, who actually listened without weighing everything against what Haley wanted. If anyone would understand, it would be him. I called my grandfather Frank, 75 years old and as steady and kind as I remembered from all those years of childhood when he was the only one who ever made me feel truly valued. When I told him what had happened, his voice went quiet, not with indifference, but with disbelief, like he couldn't quite wrap his head around the fact that our family had allowed something so petty, so cruel, to overshadow what should have been one of the happiest moments of my life. He was shocked, genuinely shaken by the idea that my parents would so openly support Haley's selfishness, and even more so by the thought that they expected me to accept it without protest. He promised me he would come to the wedding, no matter how far the journey, no matter how much his heart struggled these days. And then, after a long pause, he added something I hadn't expected. He told me he was very wealthy, more than I ever knew, and that after hearing how my parents had betrayed me, he was considering revising his will. Not out of revenge, he said, but out of fairness, because loyalty, especially within a family, should mean something. 4 days later, my parents called me out of the blue, their voices oddly upbeat, as if nothing had happened, as if the last week hadn't been filled with silence, betrayal, and the weight of yet another abandonment. "We've thought it over. We're coming," my mom said, her tone carrying that familiar mix of forced warmth and quiet condescension, like they were doing me a favor by showing up to the wedding they had already written off. There was no apology, no acknowledgement of the hurt they had caused, just a flat announcement, as if I should be grateful for their sudden change of heart. A few hours after that, Haley updated her social media to say the anniversary party was being postponed because some of her friends couldn't make it. No mention of me, no ownership, no hint of responsibility. She never reached out, never apologized, never admitted she tried to sabotage my day. They all just tried to quietly rewrite the story, pretending nothing had happened, as if my forgiveness was automatic and my pain didn't need to be addressed. My grandfather later confirmed what I had already suspected in the pit of my stomach, that he had, in fact, threatened to exclude them from his will. He told me without hesitation that after hearing everything I shared, he called my parents directly and told them how ashamed he was of their behavior, how disgusted he felt knowing they were willing to let their daughter's wedding be overshadowed just to cater to Haley's ego. And that's when they changed their minds. Not out of love, not out of remorse or a desire to make things right, but out of greed, because the idea of being cut off from his wealth was suddenly more frightening to them than losing me. Their sudden interest in attending, their carefully controlled tones, their silence around Haley's actions. It all made sense once I knew the truth. They weren't showing up for me. They were showing up for the money. I decided they weren't coming. I had spent too long hoping for love disguised as obligation, and I wasn't going to let them stand at my wedding pretending to be something they hadn't been in years. So I called my parents and told them as calmly as I could that I no longer needed their fake visits or their forced smiles, that this wasn't a performance they could show up to because inheritance money was on the line. They immediately accused me of being dramatic, of overreacting, of ruining a chance to move forward, as if I was the one who had turned my wedding into a battleground. A few minutes later, Haley sent me a message so cruel and petty, so full of insults and thinly veiled resentment, that I didn't even read it twice. I blocked her right then and there, not out of anger but because peace doesn't grow in places that feed off manipulation. I chose to protect my joy, and that meant keeping them all out. Relatives began reaching out, one after another, their messages laced with judgment and guilt, demanding to know how I could do something so heartless as to not let my own parents attend my wedding. They spoke in scolding tones, some subtle, some not, all echoing the same sentiment: family is family no matter what. But none of them had been there when I cried alone after that first phone call, none of them had watched my parents choose Haley time and time again, and none of them had to carry the quiet weight of being treated like an afterthought in my own life. I knew what they couldn't understand, that sometimes the only way to protect yourself is to draw a line so clear it can't be ignored. Keeping them out wasn't revenge. It was the only way to show them how far they had gone, how deeply they had hurt me, and how I would never again accept love that came with strings and conditions. It was the only way to finally choose myself. On my wedding day, I was surrounded by the people who truly loved me. My grandfather, Jack, and the friends and family who had shown up for the right reasons, not out of guilt or greed but out of genuine care and respect. The morning was calm, filled with quiet joy and soft laughter as I got ready, the air heavy with the kind of peace I had fought so hard to protect. But just before the ceremony, someone knocked on the dressing room door, and when I asked who it was, one of the bridesmaids told me it was my mom. She had shown up, uninvited, holding a gift bag and wearing the kind of forced smile I had seen too many times to mistake for sincerity. I didn't even open the door. I stood on the other side, heart steady, and told her she couldn't come in. She had already made her choice when she sided with Haley, when she dismissed my pain, when she treated my wedding as optional. She chose the fake anniversary, the drama, the performance, and she could live with that choice. My day was no longer hers to ruin. After the wedding, Jack and I flew to Hawaii for our honeymoon, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I let myself breathe without the weight of family drama hanging over my head. We spent our days on quiet beaches and our nights watching the sun sink into the ocean, and for that 1 week, it felt like the world had finally given me space to heal. But exactly 7 days after we landed, I got a call from my mom. Her voice was careful, almost too cheerful at first, and then she said, "Your grandfather was cold to us. Maybe you could say a good word to him?" I didn't react right away. I just let the silence stretch between us, listening to the sound of waves outside our hotel balcony. Then I asked her directly, my voice quiet but steady, "Do you want me to help you stay in the will?" She didn't say a word. Not yes, not no. Just silence. And in that silence I heard everything. A few weeks later, the truth finally landed like a stone in the center of the family. My parents and Haley found out that Grandpa had officially excluded them from the inheritance. The news hit them harder than any words I could have ever said, and instead of reflecting on how their actions had led them there, they did exactly what I had come to expect. They looked for someone to blame. That someone, of course, was me. They filed a lawsuit against me, claiming I had manipulated Grandpa, that I had influenced him during a vulnerable moment, twisting the narrative to make myself look like the victim. When Grandpa heard about it, he didn't get angry. He laughed, not with joy, but with the kind of disbelief only a deeply disappointed man can carry. "They ruined everything themselves," he said, shaking his head. I just finally stopped pretending not to notice. The court case didn't last long. It was dismissed almost as quickly as it was filed because my grandfather had everything in order. Documents showing the changes to his will, medical certificates confirming his mental clarity, and witnesses who had been present during the conversations that led to his decision. There was nothing to argue, no loophole to exploit, and once the judge ruled, it was over. But the damage they inflicted on themselves wasn't. My parents, already stretched thin from years of pretending to live above their means, sank under the weight of legal fees and the financial fallout of a battle they had no chance of winning. Not long after, I received a message from them, simple, almost desperate, asking me for help. I didn't respond. It wasn't anger that held me back or even satisfaction. It was closure. That message was my final step toward them, not in reconciliation but in release. I had given them every chance to love me. I had opened every door, tried every path, and in the end, they chose themselves over me every single time. So I chose silence. And in that silence, there was peace, steady, quiet, and finally mine. Last Friday, I got a message from a cousin I still keep in touch with, someone who's seen both sides of the story and never tried to sugarcoat it. He told me that my mother has been calling around to relatives, crying into the phone, painting herself as the heartbroken victim of a daughter who turned cold. She's saying I'm cruel, that I destroyed the family peace, and that I ruined, in her words, the established relationship with Olivia. That phrase stuck with me, not because it hurt but because it revealed exactly what they value: appearances, performance, and the illusion of harmony. No one, not a single person she's called, seems to mention what those so-called good relations cost me. No one talks about the years I spent being sidelined, silenced, and pushed to accept less so someone else could have more. They call it peace, but it was peace bought at the price of my voice, my boundaries, and my place in the family. And now that I've finally refused to pay it, I'm the villain in a story they wrote without me. After the lawsuit ended and the court dismissed their claims, I thought I could finally exhale, maybe even let go of the tension that had followed me like a shadow for years. But last week, just when the quiet started to feel real, I received an email from an untraceable address. No name, no subject line, just a single chilling sentence inside: "Hope he doesn't live long." I stared at the screen for a long time, my hands cold, my heart pounding with a fear I hadn't felt in years. It didn't matter who sent it, what mattered was that someone did. I saved the email immediately and passed it on to my lawyer, who assured me we'd take the necessary steps. But that night, as I lay awake with Jack sleeping beside me and the sound of Ellie breathing softly down the hall, I couldn't help but wonder, was my family ever really a family? Or had I spent my entire life clinging to an idea, a word that was never backed by love or loyalty, only control and silence and unspoken debts? The truth hit harder than the threat itself. I wasn't just grieving a relationship, I was grieving the illusion of one.